The fluorescent light of my kitchen hummed, a sound I'd lived with for 30 years. It flickered over the last invoice, a crisp, cream-colored rectangle of paper sitting on the oak table my own hands had built. Gilded Meadow Estates, the embossing read, the final payment. The numbers at the bottom seemed to blur. I looked down at my hands resting on either side of the paper. They were not the hands of a man who belonged in a place like the Gilded Meadow. They were maps of a life spent hauling brick, smoothing mortar, and framing houses for other families. The knuckles were swollen, the skin thick as leather, and a fine, pale dust seemed permanently etched into every line, a ghost of the cement I'd worked with for 50 years. This single invoice was more than my last 2 jobs combined. It was the final piece of a wedding that had consumed 18 months and every last cent I had. 18 months ago, my daughter, Sierra, had burst into this very kitchen, her eyes shining, her left hand held out. "He asked me, Daddy. Damien asked me." Damien Cromwell, a good-looking kid from a good family, a family with money that didn't come from cement dust and aching backs. The Cromwells owned a string of high-end restaurants, their name synonymous with old Austin money. I was happy for her, for my girl, my Sky. But then came the plans. "Daddy, we have to make an impression," she'd said, her voice earnest. "The Cromwells, they're used to a certain standard. I don't want them to think—" She never finished the sentence. She didn't have to. So I did what I always did. I gave. I'd had a piece of land out past the city limits, a small 5-acre plot I'd bought cheap in the 70s. It was my dream, my plan for old age, a small rental house, a little income for when my back finally gave out for good. I sold it. I didn't even hesitate. I signed the papers, took the check, and handed it right over to Sierra. "This is for your happiness, Princess," I'd told her, and I'd meant it. Now the money was gone. Every last dollar, funneled into Vera Ricci gowns, 5-tier cakes from Mr. Estevez's bakery, and a string quartet. All to build a single day of happiness for my daughter. I picked up the invoice. My fingers, calloused and bent, traced the elegant script. I'd built houses that would stand for 100 years. But this was the most expensive thing I'd ever built. And it would be over in 8 hours. I pushed the chair back. The legs scraped against the linoleum. Time to water the roses. If you're watching this video, tell me where you're from or what time it is for you. The evening air in Austin was thick and humid, smelling of magnolia and cut grass. I grabbed the old galvanized watering can from the porch, the handle worn smooth as glass from my grip. The spigot hissed as I filled it, the sound loud in the twilight quiet. Tomorrow, my Sierra would become Mrs. Damien Cromwell. She was upstairs now, in the room I'd painted for her when she was 10. Pale pink, then lavender, then this sophisticated beige she'd picked out when she went to college. She'd ordered me not to bother her. "Daddy, you can't see me before the wedding. It's bad luck," she'd joked yesterday, kissing my rough cheek. Her laughter was the only music I ever needed. I walked over to the rose bushes lining the side of the house, right beneath her open window. I'd planted these bushes the year my wife Miranda passed. They were my therapy, my connection to her. Every spring, I pruned them, fed them, talked to them like an old fool, and they repaid me. They grew lush and heavy, with blooms the size of my fist. A month ago, Sierra had hugged me right here. "Daddy, your roses are the most beautiful in the world. I want to carry them for my bouquet. Just flowers from your garden. They'll bring me luck." I smiled at the memory, the ache in my lower back easing for a moment. I leaned down, the watering can tipping, a dark circle spreading in the dry soil. These calloused hands she loved, the ones that grew her flowers. They'd done good work. From the open window above, I heard her voice. She was on the phone, laughing. The tone was light, happy. Probably talking to Damien. I didn't mean to listen. I was just an old man watering his flowers, thinking about his daughter's happiness. I moved to the next bush, the water splashing softly. "No, I told him not to come up," Sierra was saying. I heard her flop back onto her bed. The springs squeaked. "God, Damien, I'm so nervous." "About the wedding?" I heard his voice, a muffled sound from the phone's speaker. "No, not the ceremony. I'm nervous about my father." I froze. The watering can stopped mid-pour. I stood perfectly still, my heart suddenly heavy in my chest. What was she worried about? Had I done something wrong? "Damien, you've seen him," she said, and her voice dropped, taking on an edge I'd never heard before. It was sharp, brittle. "He's just so unpolished." A cold dread, heavier than any bag of cement, settled on my shoulders. I stood motionless, the sound of crickets suddenly deafening. "I mean, your parents are so elegant. Randall and Catherine are, well, they're the Cromwells. They're refined. And my father, Damien, he's just a construction worker, a laborer." My hand tightened on the metal handle of the watering can. The metal bit into my palm. A laborer. The word hung in the humid air, an accusation. He's going to be there in that one old, shiny suit he owns. The one he's had for 20 years. The one he buried my mother in. How is that going to look? Him standing next to your father in his custom tuxedo. Her voice was rising, a note of panic creeping into it. I'm so embarrassed. What will Catherine think? She already looks at me like I'm something she scraped off her shoe. And now she's going to see my father. And she'll know. "Know what, Sierra?" I thought, my throat tightening. "Know that I loved you? Know that I worked my fingers to the bone for you?" "She'll know where I come from," she whispered, as if answering my silent question. I couldn't move. My feet were rooted to the soil, right next to the roses she wanted for her bouquet. "It's not just the suit, Damien," Sierra continued, her voice a rapid-fire burst of anxiety. It's him. He always smells like cement. Even after he showers, I can still smell it on him. It's in his skin." My stomach clenched. I unconsciously raised the collar of my work shirt to my nose. I smelled of sweat, honest work, and the earth. I'd always thought it was a clean smell, a good smell, the smell of a house being built. "And his hands," she said, her voice dropping with disgust. "God, his hands are awful. They're like sandpaper. Rough, calloused. They're a laborer's hands. I'm so embarrassed for him to even shake Randall's hand." These hands, I thought, looking down at them. The watering can trembled. These hands held you when you were a baby. These hands changed your diapers, tied your shoes, built the very house you're lying in. These hands paid for your college, paid for your clothes, paid for this entire damn wedding. I just don't want your mom to look at me and think she's welcoming a girl from a blue-collar background into the family. This is about us, Damien. About our future. His muffled laughter came through the phone. He was agreeing with her. He was laughing at me. "Listen," Sierra said, her voice suddenly conspiratorial, dropping to a low hiss. "I have an idea. What if we just tell everyone he's sick?" The world tilted. I grabbed the rose bush to steady myself. Thorns dug deep into my palm, but I barely felt the sting. "What do you mean, sick?" Damien asked. "Remember he had those back problems last year after that big job? The sciatica?" We could just say, "It flared up. A really bad attack. So bad he can't come to the ceremony. He can't even leave the house." A suffocating pressure built in my chest. I couldn't breathe. She wasn't just embarrassed. She was planning to erase me, to hide me away like a dirty secret while she floated down the aisle on a cloud of my money. "But he paid for everything," Damien mumbled. A flicker of what? Guilt? No, just logistics. "He already paid, Damien," Sierra snapped back, her voice cold and hard. "That's the point. We don't need him anymore. The checks have all cleared. The important thing is that he doesn't ruin the day with his appearance. We don't need him anymore." "Think about it," she pushed. "He stays home. We tell your parents he had a terrible sciatica attack. He's devastated he's missing it. Everyone feels sorry for us and for him. It's perfect. He doesn't embarrass me, and Catherine doesn't have to socialize with a bricklayer." Clang. The galvanized watering can slipped from my numb fingers. It hit the stone path with a hollow metallic sound that seemed to echo in the sudden silence from the window above. The water spilled out, a dark stain spreading over the path, soaking my boots. "What was that?" Sierra's voice, sharp with alarm. "I don't know," Damien said. I heard the squeak of her bed, then footsteps. I couldn't move. I was a statue of an old man, a fool standing in a puddle bleeding from the hand. Her head poked out the window. "Daddy?" she called out into the twilight. "Daddy, is that you?" I was hidden in the deep shadow of the eaves. I held my breath. My heart was a stone in my chest. She stared into the darkness for a long moment. I could see her silhouette, my beautiful daughter, my princess, the girl who was ashamed of me. "Must have been a raccoon," she muttered. She pulled her head back in and shut the window. The lock clicked into place, sealing me out. I stood there for a long time. The physical pain in my hand was a dull throb, but it was nothing. Nothing compared to the cold, hollow cavern that had just been ripped open inside me. 50 years. 50 years of sweat and sacrifice. My back, my knees, my hands, all given for her. Miranda, my late wife. On her deathbed, her hand, frail and paper-thin, had gripped mine. "Ashton," she'd whispered, her voice a thread. "Our girl. She's all we have. Give her the world. Promise me." And I had. Dear God, I had. I'd given her the world. And in return, she was going to give me a fictional case of sciatica and hide me in the back room. I felt my knees buckle. I leaned against the rough brick wall of the house I'd built. We don't need him anymore. I don't remember walking back inside. I found myself sitting at the kitchen table again. The fluorescent light hummed. The invoice for the gilded meadow estates was still there, a pale mockery on the dark wood. Next to it was the pile, 18 months of receipts, a mountain of paper that represented my life. The deposit for the Vera Ricci dress, the payments to Mr. Estevez for a menu I couldn't even pronounce, the non-refundable fee for Ronan, the photographer who'd shot the governor's daughter's wedding. Every receipt was an hour of my life. Every signature was a day spent in the heat or the cold. Every dollar was a piece of the dream I'd sold. That little rental house, that quiet old age. And she was ashamed. Ashamed of the cement dust. ashamed of the hands that had earned it all. I sat there as the kitchen grew dark. I didn't turn on any other lights. The hum of the fluorescent bulb was my only companion. Embarrassing dad. Unpolished. Laborer's hands. We don't need him anymore. The words played over and over in my head, a broken record. I saw her as a little girl, riding on my shoulders. I saw her at her high school graduation, hugging me, "Thank you, Daddy." I saw her just last month, kissing my rough cheek, telling me my roses would bring her luck. Was it all a lie? A long 18-month con? Or just the casual cruelty of a child who had always gotten everything she ever wanted? I didn't know. And I realized, sitting there in the dark, it didn't matter. The result was the same. I was a tool to be used and then discarded. An ATM with rough hands. A checkbook that smelled like cement. No. A cold, hard clarity settled over me. It wasn't anger. It was something heavier, something final. It was the sound of a foundation cracking. I would not be hidden. I would not be erased. I would not be the embarrassing secret at the back of the house. I am Ashton Wilcox. I am a builder. And I have built houses that have stood for 50 years. I would not let my own life, the house of my own dignity, be torn down by a spoiled child and her snickering fiancé. I sat at that table until the first gray light of dawn crept through the window. I didn't sleep. I didn't move. I just waited. I knew exactly what I had to do. At 4 a.m. the house was silent. Outside, the birds hadn't even started to sing. I pushed myself up from the kitchen table. My back screamed in protest. Real pain, not the convenient kind my daughter had invented for me. I walked to my bedroom. I opened the closet and pulled out my suit. The only suit. The black wool was shiny at the elbows, the fabric thin. The one I'd worn to Miranda's funeral. The one I was supposed to wear to walk my daughter down the aisle. I showered. I scrubbed my hands. But Sierra was right. The smell of cement and mortar dust was part of me. It was in my skin. It was the smell of my sacrifice. Today I would wear it as armor. I put on the suit. I straightened the tie. I combed my gray hair. I looked in the mirror. An old man stared back, his eyes tired but hard. There were no more tears, only resolve. I went back to the kitchen and gathered the stack of invoices and contracts. I slid them into an old leather satchel. Every piece of paper was a nail in the coffin of my daughter's perfect day. I grabbed my keys and walked out of the house I'd built. The sky was a deep, bruised purple when I pulled up to a payphone outside an all-night diner. I didn't want the calls coming from my house. My hands were steady as I dropped the coins in. I pulled a small, dog-eared notebook from my pocket and dialed the first number. The emergency line for the Gilded Meadow Estates manager. A sleepy, annoyed voice answered. "Gilded Meadow, this is Denise." "Ms. Denise, this is Ashton Wilcox, father of the bride for the Wilcox-Cromwell wedding today." "Mr. Wilcox, it's 4:30 in the morning. Is everything all right?" "No, ma'am, it is not," I said, my voice calm and level. "Due to family circumstances, the wedding is canceled, effective immediately." Silence, then a splutter. "What? Canceled? Mr. Wilcox? You can't be serious. We have 200 guests arriving in 6 hours. The staff is coming in. The flowers are here." "I am perfectly serious, Ms. Denise. The bride no longer requires your services. Do not let anyone from the Cromwell party onto the premises." "But the contract, the deposit, it's non-refundable." "I am aware of that," I said. "I am the one who paid it. Have a good day, ma'am." I hung up before she could argue. One down. I dialed the next number. Vera Ricci. Couture Bridal. The call went to her studio voicemail. I left a message. Ms. Ricci, this is Ashton Wilcox. The $8,000 gown for Sierra Wilcox will no longer be needed. Do not deliver it to my home. The wedding is off. Next. Ms. Carmela, the florist. She actually answered. Her voice panicked. She was already at her shop, loading the centerpieces. Ms. Carmela, Ashton Wilcox, the flowers for the Gilded Meadow. They're canceled. Mr. Ashton, but I have them. The roses. Your roses. They are in the bridal bouquet, just as you asked. What do I do? The bride has decided she doesn't want them, I said. Take the flowers to the church. Any church. Let them serve God. They're too good to be wasted on this. I hung up on her sobs. Next, Mr. Estevez, the caterer. He was furious. Do you know how much food I have prepared? The salmon? The tenderloin? I'm sorry for the inconvenience, Mr. Estevez, but the bride no longer has an appetite. Next, Ronan, the photographer. His voicemail. Ronan, Ashton Wilcox, don't bother coming to the house. The wedding is canceled. One by one, I called them all. The string quartet, the limousine company, the calligrapher. With every call, a chain link broke. With every cancellation, a piece of the crushing weight on my chest lifted. I wasn't just canceling a wedding. I was taking my life back. At 7:59 a.m., I was waiting outside the glass doors of my local bank branch. I was the first one in when the doors unlocked. Carter, a young man who had processed the loan for Sierra's college tuition years ago, smiled when he saw me. Mr. Wilcox, good morning. This is the big day, isn't it? Congratulations. Morning, Carter. Not exactly. I need to put an immediate and total freeze on all my accounts, checking and savings. His smile faltered. A freeze? Mr. Wilcox, is there a problem? Fraud? You could call it that, I said, my voice grim. I want a new password, a new PIN, and a rule that no transaction, no transfer, no withdrawal of any kind can be made without my physical presence and signature. No exceptions. He saw the look in my eyes and nodded, his professionalism kicking in. Okay, Mr. Wilcox. Let's get that done for you right now. He typed furiously. I signed papers. I chose a new password, Miranda, something Sierra would never guess. All right, Carter said, looking troubled. It's done. Your accounts are locked down tight. Not a single dollar can move without you being right here. Mr. Wilcox, is everything okay? Everything, I said, standing up, is finally under control. As I walked out, I saw Damien's shiny black sports car pull into the bank's parking lot. He was probably coming to check on the joint account he and Sierra had, waiting for the last of my money to transfer. He was a few minutes too late. I got home at 8:30 a.m. The house was still quiet. Sierra was upstairs, sleeping peacefully, dreaming of her perfect day, unaware that the foundation had already crumbled beneath her. I walked to the hall table, the one where we always left messages for each other. I took a piece of paper and a pen. My hand, the rough laborer's hand she was so ashamed of, was perfectly steady. I kept it short. I kept it honest. Sierra, since my rough hands and the smell of cement might ruin your perfect party, I've decided not to bother you. The wedding is canceled, all of it. The venue, the caterer, the flowers, the dress. The money stays with me. I'll find something more worthy to spend it on. You're embarrassing, Dad. I folded the note, wrote Sierra on the front, and placed it squarely in the middle of the table, right where she couldn't miss it when she came down. I didn't wait for her to wake up. I couldn't be in that house when the storm broke. I grabbed my satchel, got back in my old truck, and drove. I drove to the one place that had ever brought me peace. The cemetery was quiet, the grass damp with dew. I walked the familiar path to Miranda's grave. The marble was cool to the touch. I sat on the grass, my black suit getting damp, and I just talked. "I'm sorry, Miranda," I whispered, tracing the letters of her name. "I tried. I really tried to give her the world, just like you asked. But I think I gave her too much. I think I forgot to teach her where it all came from. She's ashamed, Miranda. Ashamed of me. Ashamed of the work that paid for her life." The wind whispered through the old oak tree nearby. So I stopped it. I stopped it all. I don't know what happens now, but I couldn't let her do it. I couldn't let her throw me away like that. I placed my rough hand on the headstone. "I hope you understand." I sat there for an hour, maybe 2. The sun started to climb, and I felt a strange, cold peace. I had lost my daughter, but I had found myself. When I got back to the house, it was just after 10:30 a.m. The makeup artist and hairdresser were supposed to be arriving. Instead, as I pulled up, I heard a sound I'd never heard in my home. A scream. Not of fear, but of pure, unadulterated rage. The storm had broken. I walked in the front door. Sierra was in the hall, her silk robe falling off one shoulder, her hair a mess. She was holding the note in her hand, her face pale and blotchy with fury. "Daddy!" she shrieked, her voice cracking. "What is this? What does this mean? This is a joke, right? A sick, horrible joke." "It means exactly what it says, Sierra," I said, my voice quiet. I felt strangely calm, detached. You canceled it," she stammered, her eyes wide with disbelief. "You canceled my wedding? How could you? The guests are on their way. Damien's parents are flying in." "Everything is ready." "No, it's not," I said, walking past her toward the kitchen. "It's not ready anymore. I canceled everything. The Gilded Meadow, Vera Ricci, Mr. Estevez, it's done." "You're insane," she screamed, following me. "You've gone senile. You're a monster. You ruined my life. Why? Why would you do this?" I stopped. I turned to face her. My daughter, my princess, looking at me with pure hatred. "Why?" I asked, my voice dangerously low. "Because I was watering the roses last night, Sierra, under your window." Her face froze. The color drained from it. The hatred vanished, replaced by a sudden, sickening horror. She knew. "I heard you," I said, my voice flat. "I heard it all. Your conversation with Damien." "Daddy," she whispered, her hand flying to her mouth. "Daddy, no. You misunderstood. I was nervous. I understood perfectly," I interrupted. "I'm unpolished. I smell like cement. You're ashamed of my laborer's hands. You were going to tell everyone I had sciatica so I wouldn't ruin your day with my appearance." "No, Daddy, please," she tried, stepping toward me. "And my favorite part," I said, holding up a hand to stop her. "The part that really stuck with me. He already paid for everything. We don't need him anymore." Sierra crumpled. She didn't just cry. She sobbed, a terrible tearing sound. "I didn't mean it. I didn't mean it, Daddy, I swear." "You meant every word, Sierra," I said, the coldness in my own heart surprising me. "You just didn't mean for me to hear it. Well, this unpolished old man decided you were right. You don't need me, so you don't need my money either. The party's over." As if on cue, Sierra's phone, discarded on the kitchen counter, began to ring. The screen lit up. Damien. She stared at it, her sobs catching in her throat. Answer it, I said. Tell your fiancé the plan has changed. She picked it up, her hand shaking. Damien? His voice was a furious squawk, audible even from where I stood. What the hell is going on, Sierra? I just got a call from the Gilded Meadow. They said your father canceled? They won't let my parents on the property. They're standing at the gate. Sierra looked at me, her eyes pleading. I just stared back. Damien. Daddy. He heard us, she whispered into the phone. Last night. He heard everything. There was a pause, a long, dead silence. Then Damien's voice came again, but this time, all pretense of the charming fiancé was gone. It was cold, sharp, and full of contempt. Put him on the phone. Now. She held the phone out to me, her hand trembling. I took it. Wilcox. Mr. Wilcox? Damien spat, the name an insult. You're a senile old fool. You can't do this. You have no idea who you're messing with. My family will... Your family will do nothing, I said, my voice like ice. The contracts were in my name. The payments came from my account. I have canceled the services I paid for. It's done. You ruined everything, he roared. That was our money. You gave it to us. I gave it to my daughter, I corrected him, for a wedding. There is no wedding, so the money stays with me. You and your refined family can pay for your own parties from now on. You're a dead man, old man. We'll sue you. I hung up the phone. I placed it gently back on the counter. Sierra was staring at me, her face a mask of terror and rage. He's right, she whispered. We'll sue you. We'll get that money. You can't just take it. It was never yours to take, I said. I walked out of the kitchen, went to my room and locked the door. I sat on my bed and listened. I heard her calling her friends, her bridesmaids. I heard her calling the Cromwells. I heard her screaming, crying, and throwing things. The carefully built house of her perfect life was collapsing, brick by brick, and I had been the one to pull out the cornerstone. A week later, the official papers arrived. A uniformed courier handed me a thick envelope. I didn't even need to open it to know what it was. Sierra Wilcox and Damien Cromwell versus Ashton Wilcox. I sat at the kitchen table, the same table where it had all begun, and read the legal jargon. They were petitioning the court to have me declared mentally incompetent. Signs of advanced senile dementia, it read. Erratic and irrational behavior, delusions, inability to manage his own financial affairs. Their proof was the cancellation of the wedding. A clear sign of a psychotic break, the document argued. He has caused severe financial and emotional distress to his only daughter and her fiancé. They weren't just suing me for the money. They were trying to strip me of my rights, to have me declared a non-person, to lock me away, mentally and legally, so they could get their hands on what was left of my savings. My own daughter, my Sierra. She was trying to have me committed. The rage I'd held back finally surged, hot and pure. They thought I was a weak, unpolished old man. They thought they could just roll over me. I picked up the phone book. I wasn't going to let them win. Mr. Shaw, the lawyer Sierra and Damien had hired, was a shark. I saw his face on billboards all over Austin, promising aggressive representation. I needed someone who wasn't afraid of sharks. I found Felix Hayes. His office was a small, dusty walk-up above a bakery. He was my age with a rumpled suit and eyes that had seen everything. He wasn't on any billboards. I sat in his office and told him the entire story. From the first invoice to the phone call under the window to the lawsuit. I didn't leave anything out. When I finished, he leaned back in his squeaky chair and steepled his fingers. Well, Mr. Wilcox, Ashton, he said, his voice a low gravel. You're in a pile of it. They're not just coming for the money you saved. They're coming for you. This incompetence claim is nasty. It's a way to bypass the whole argument and just seize your assets. I'm not incompetent, Felix. I'm just done. I believe you, he said. But a judge might not. A daughter crying on the stand about her sick, confused father is a powerful image. Mr. Shaw is good at creating those images. He'll paint you as a spiteful, crazy old man. So what do? We fight back, not with emotion, with facts. We prove you're not irrational. We prove you're methodical. We prove you were the one being manipulated. He leaned forward. Where are the receipts? Right here, I said, patting my leather satchel. All of them? The contracts, the bank statements, the invoices for the last 18 months? Everything. That, Felix said, a small, grim smile on his face, is our defense. That's not the work of a confused man. That's the work of a dedicated, meticulous father. That folder is our key evidence. It proves your sanity. I felt a sliver of hope for the first time in a week. Felix was right. The paperwork was the proof. It showed the planning, the long-term commitment. It was the antidote to their sudden psychotic break story. I went home, holding the satchel a little tighter. Felix told me to guard it with my life. He would start preparing our response for the court. That night, I put the satchel on my nightstand next to my bed. I locked my bedroom door, something I hadn't done in 30 years. I was rattled, but I was tired. The stress of the last week caught up with me, and I fell into a deep, heavy sleep. I woke to the sound of shattering glass. My heart hammered against my ribs. I sat bolt upright. The sound came from downstairs, the kitchen. I grabbed the heavy-duty flashlight I kept by the bed. I fumbled for my phone. 911. Call 911. I crept out of my room, my heart in my throat. Who's there? I yelled, my voice shaking. I heard footsteps, running. The back door slammed shut. I rushed downstairs, my hand shaking so badly I could barely hold the flashlight steady. The beam cut through the darkness. The kitchen window over the sink was shattered, glass everywhere. The back door was wide open, a cold draft blowing in. They're gone, I breathed, leaning against the counter. A simple break-in. Then I froze. I ran back upstairs, my legs pumping, my lungs burning. I burst into my bedroom. The room was tossed. Drawers were open, clothes on the floor. And the nightstand. The nightstand was empty. My leather satchel was gone. The folder, the receipts, the contracts, the bank statements, everything. All my proof. They hadn't come for my TV. They hadn't come for the bit of cash I kept in a drawer. They had come for one thing. No, I whispered, sinking onto the bed. No. Damien. It had to be Damien. He'd done this. He'd sent someone. They'd stolen my defense. They'd stolen my sanity. Felix's words echoed in my head. That's our key evidence. And now it was gone. When the police left after taking my report and sweeping up the glass, I sat at my kitchen table in the cold light of dawn, completely numb. They'd been professional, but it was clear. A simple bayani. They'd find nothing. I called Felix. His response was a string of curses. They're not just sharks, Ashton. They're criminals. he seethed. Shaw will have a field day. He'll say you invented the folder. He'll say it's another one of your delusions. So that's it? I said, my voice hollow. I lose. They just win? There was a long silence on the line. Then Felix's voice came back, hard as steel. No, we don't let them win. They stole the copies. They didn't steal the originals. They didn't steal the bank's records. They didn't steal the vendor's memories. A spark ignited in my chest. They wanted a war, Ashton, Felix said. So we're going to give them one. You're a builder, right? Well, our first house just got demolished. So we're going to rebuild it, brick by brick. Get your keys. We have work to do. For the next 3 days, Felix and I drove all over Austin. It wasn't a passive memory of sacrifice anymore. It was an active hunt. Our first stop was the bank. Carter's face was grim when I told him about the break-in. They did what? He spent 2 hours printing every check, every transfer, every bank statement from the last 2 years. He stamped every single page with a notary seal. Here you go, Mr. Wilcox, he said, handing me the thick stack. This is bank-certified proof. Next, we went to Vera Ricci's exclusive boutique. Ms. Ricci herself, an impossibly elegant woman, listened with a frown. That Cromwell boy, she sniffed. No class. I'll have my accountant pull your payment history immediately. An affidavit, Mr. Hayes? Of course. Then to Mr. Estevez's bakery. He was a large man with flour in his mustache. Heard about the wedding, Ashton. A real shame. When we told him why it was a shame, his face turned purple. They're saying you're loco? After you spent an hour with me tasting 6 different kinds of lemon curd filling? Because you said Sierra liked lemon? I'll sign whatever you need. That girl? He shook his head. No respect. We went to Ms. Carmela, the florist, Ronan, the photographer, the string quartet leader. One by one, we rebuilt the paper trail. Our last stop was a small, greasy spoon diner called the Corner Joint. The owner, Mr. Jacobs, a man I'd known for 30 years, wiped his hands on his apron. Ashton, haven't seen you in ages. Not since Sierra graduated. Hello, Mr. Jacobs. This is my lawyer, Felix Hayes. Lawyer? Jacobs looked worried. Mr. Jacobs, Felix said. Is it true that Ashton worked here, washing dishes for almost 4 years while his daughter was in college? Jacobs's eyes widened. Worked here? Hell, he practically lived here. Pulled a full construction shift, then came here and washed dishes from 6 till midnight. Every weekday. To pay for her tutors, he told me. Said his girl was smart, deserved the best. Why? Would you be willing to testify to that in court? Jacobs looked at me, then back at Felix. You just tell me when and where, counselor. That man's a father. A real one. We walked out with a stack of certified documents and a list of witnesses. It was better than the original folder. This wasn't just paper. This was a chorus of voices. They thought they just had to fight an old man, Felix said, slapping the new, thicker folder. They didn't realize they were picking a fight with the entire city. The day of the hearing, the courtroom was packed. Damien and Sierra sat at the plaintiff's table, right next to Mr. Shaw. Sierra was dressed in a simple, dark dress, a tissue clutched in her hand. She looked like a victim. Damien wore an expensive suit, his face a mask of solemn concern. The Cromwells, Randall, and Catherine sat in the front row. Catherine looked like she was carved from ice, staring straight ahead. Judge Harlow, a no-nonsense woman with sharp eyes, called the court to order. Mr. Shaw started. He was slick. He was good. He painted a picture of a loving, devoted daughter, terrified for her father's precipitous mental decline. "This wasn't a choice, Your Honor," Shaw boomed. "This was a tragedy, a psychotic episode, and we are just trying to get Mr. Wilcox the help he so desperately needs." He called his witnesses. First, my neighbor, Mrs. Landry. She'd always been nosy. "Oh, yes," she said, dabbing her eyes. "Ashton, he's been odd, talking to himself in the garden, forgetting my name. Just last week I saw him staring at his roses for an hour. Just staring." Felix stood up for cross-examination. "Mrs. Landry," he said gently, "weren't you in Florida last week visiting your sister, according to your social media?" She turned red. "Well, it might have been the week before." "And isn't it true," Felix continued, "that Mr. Cromwell's catering company provided the food for your son's graduation party, free of charge, just 2 days ago?" The courtroom murmured. Judge Harlow banged her gavel. "Objection!" Shaw yelled. "Sustained, but the witness's credibility is noted," Judge Harlow said, her eyes narrowing. Next, Shaw called Paxton, a guy I'd worked a few construction jobs with. "Oh yeah, Art's been slipping," Paxton said, chewing gum. "Losing tools, confused about measurements. We all just thought, he was getting old." Felix rose again. "Mr. Paxton, are you currently employed?" "Nah, laid off." "Yet you deposited $3,000 in cash into your bank account yesterday, didn't you? An account that was overdrawn the day before." Paxton's jaw dropped. Shaw was on his feet, screaming. Judge Harlow slammed her gavel. "One more outburst like that, Mr. Shaw, and you'll be in contempt. Mr. Hayes, you've made your point. Step down, Mr. Paxton. Your testimony is stricken." Sierra was the last witness. She was brilliant. She cried. She spoke of her love for me, her hero. She talked about how this illness had twisted me into someone she didn't know. I'm so scared for him," she wept. "I just want my daddy back. We need to get him help. We need to take care of him, manage his affairs until he's himself again." It was a perfect performance. I could feel the courtroom's sympathy shifting to her. Judge Harlow looked at her with pity. My stomach turned. She was good. She was very good. So the hearing was adjourned for the day. Judge Harlow set the next session for 2 days later, when we would present our defense. Felix and I were packing our briefcases in the hallway, feeling beaten. Sierra's testimony had hurt us. "She's a damn good actress," Felix muttered. "She almost had me believing her." "Mr. Hayes?" We turned. It was Catherine Cromwell, Damien's mother. She stood there, rigid and elegant, her expensive perfume cutting through the stale courthouse air. "Mrs. Cromwell?" Felix said, his voice wary. "A pleasure." "Save it," she said, her voice a low, clipped whisper. She glanced down the empty hall. "What my son and that girl are doing is disgraceful." I stared at her. This was the woman Sierra was so terrified of. The woman who looked at me like I was dirt. "A Cromwell," she said, her nostrils flaring, "does not steal. We are not petty thieves. This farce, fabricating evidence, paying off witnesses. It's disgusting. It's weak." Felix and I were too stunned to speak. "My son is a fool," she continued, her eyes locking on Felix, "blinded by that girl. But I will not have the Cromwell name dragged through the mud by a common grift. He has dishonored us." She opened her alligator skin handbag and pulled out a slim manila envelope. She handed it to Felix. "What is this?" he asked. My son was sloppy. He used his business accounts. Those are copies of invoices. One for a private investigator who followed Mr. Wilcox for a month. Another for a security consultant. I believe you'll find that consultant's business address is the same as a known burglar for hire. The payment was made 2 days before Mr. Wilcox's house was broken into. My blood ran cold. And, she said, a copy of a wire transfer to Mr. Shaw's consulting firm, dated 2 weeks before. The wedding was even cancelled. The memo line reads, "For estate planning and guardianship services." They had been planning to have me declared incompetent before the wedding. The cancellation just gave them the excuse they needed. They were going to pay for the wedding with my money, then lock me away and take the rest. "Why are you doing this?" I asked, my voice hoarse. Catherine Cromwell looked at me, her gaze cold, but for the first time, not dismissive. "Because, Mr. Wilcox, you, a bricklayer, have more honor in your calloused little finger than my son and his fiancée have in their entire bodies. Do not make me regret this." She turned, her heels clicking on the marble, and was gone. Felix opened the envelope. He stared at the papers. "Ashton," he said, a slow smile spreading across his face. "We didn't just rebuild the house. She just handed us a cannon." 2 days later, the courtroom was even more crowded. Mr. Shaw looked smug, confident he had this in the bag after Sierra's performance. "The defense calls its first witness," Felix said, his voice booming. "Mr. Carter from Austin First National Bank." Carter, in his best suit, walked the judge through the 2 years of meticulous, on-time payments, the final withdrawal of my life savings from the land sale, and the lock I'd placed on my account before. Sierra even woke up. This was not an impulse, Your Honor. This was a planned, decisive financial action. Next, Felix called Vera Ricci, Mr. Estevez, and Mr. Jacobs. One after another, they painted a picture of me. A father who tasted 6 kinds of cake filling. A father who worked a second job for 4 years to pay for tutors. A father who was methodical, loving, and completely sane. Mr. Shaw's smug look was fading. Sierra was starting to look pale. "Your Honor," Felix said, "the plaintiffs have painted a picture of a man who suddenly snapped. We have shown a man who has been methodical and sacrificing for decades. Now, let's talk about what really happened." He placed Catherine Cromwell's documents on the projector. "This," he said, "is an invoice from a private investigator, paid by Mr. Cromwell, to tail Mr. Wilcox, dated 6 weeks ago." "Objection!" Shaw screamed, jumping to his feet. "Relevance?" "It is entirely relevant, Your Honor," Felix shot back, "as is this invoice for security services from a man currently out on bail for burglary, paid by Mr. Cromwell the day before my client's house was broken into and all his legal documents were stolen." The courtroom erupted. Sierra looked at Damien, her eyes wide with panic. Damien looked like he was going to be sick. "And this, Your Honor," Felix said, saving the best for last, "is the kill shot. A wire transfer from Mr. Cromwell to Mr. Shaw's consulting firm, dated 2 weeks before the wedding. The memo? Guardianship services?" Judge Harlow stared at the projection, then at Mr. Shaw, her face thunderous. "Mr. Shaw, you will approach the bench." "Now." Shaw, white as a sheet, walked up. We couldn't hear what she said, but her hissed words had him shaking. Felix Hayes rested his case. "Mr. Wilcox?" Judge Harlow said, her voice now dangerously quiet. "The court would like to hear from you." I stood. I walked to the witness stand. I put my left hand on the Bible and raised my right. My hand. my rough, calloused laborer's hand. I saw Sierra stare at it. Felix stood. Ashton, just tell the judge what happened. I turned to Judge Harlow. I didn't look at Sierra. I didn't look at Damien. I just looked at her. Your Honor, I said, my voice clear and strong. I am 73 years old. I have been a builder in this city for 50 years. I have worked honestly. I raised my daughter alone after my wife, Miranda, passed. I loved her more than my own life. I told her everything. I told her about the land I sold. I told her about the invoices. I told her about my hands. And then I told her about the phone call. I was in my garden, Your Honor. I was going to cut roses for her bouquet, and I heard her, my daughter, tell her fiancé that she was ashamed of me, that I was unpolished, that I smelled like cement, that I had rough hands, that she was planning to lie, to tell everyone I was sick, so I wouldn't embarrass her in front of her new, rich family. The courtroom was dead silent. I could hear Sierra start to sob, real, choked sobs this time. She said, he already paid for everything. We don't need him anymore. So, Your Honor, I made a decision. I decided she was right. They didn't need me, so they didn't get my money either. I canceled the party. I protected my savings, my last bit of dignity. I looked at Judge Harlow, my eyes meeting hers. They say I'm crazy. They say I'm incompetent. Because I refuse to be humiliated. Because I refuse to be used up and thrown away by my own child. Tell me, Your Honor, is it a sign of madness when a father refuses to pay for his own shame? I paused, then finished. I'm not sick. I'm not crazy. I'm just, finally, done. I stopped being a fool. I looked over at my daughter. She wasn't acting anymore. She was staring at her hands on the table, broken. Judge Harlow didn't even adjourn to deliberate. She slammed her gavel, her face a mask of cold fury. This court is not just a place of law, she said, her voice ringing with authority. It is a place of equity. And what I have seen here today is one of the most disgusting, predatory, and heartless abuses of the legal system I have ever witnessed. She looked at Sierra and Damien. You two, you are the poster children for greed. You conspired to defraud this man. You, Mr. Cromwell, hired criminals to harass and rob him. You, Ms. Wilcox, spat on the very hands that fed you, clothed you, and paid for your entire life. Sierra was openly weeping, shaking her head. No, please. This petition, Judge Harlow boomed, is not just dismissed. It is dismissed with prejudice. Mr. Wilcox is found to be 100% competent, rational, and in full control of his faculties. In fact, his actions were not just rational, they were admirable. She wasn't done. Mr. Shaw, your conduct is being referred to the State Bar for review, and I am instructing the District Attorney's Office to open an investigation into Mr. Cromwell for conspiracy, burglary, and perjury. Damien shot out of his chair. You can't! I can! Harlow roared. Bailiff, restrain him! A deputy grabbed Damien's arm. Randall Cromwell had his head in his hands. Catherine was already walking out of the courtroom, her back straight, not giving her son a single glance. Mr. Wilcox, Judge Harlow said, her voice softening for the first time. You have your life back, and you have this court's deepest apologies. Case closed. I walked out of the courthouse with Felix. The air outside felt different, lighter. I had won. I had won everything. My money, my name, my sanity. But as I stood on the steps, I felt a profound, crushing emptiness. I had won the battle, but I had lost my daughter. I had destroyed the very family I'd spent my entire life building. Sierra was being led out a side door by her lawyers, her face hidden. She was a pariah. Damien was in custody. The Cromwell name was in tatters. I had my dignity, but I was completely, utterly alone. Felix clapped me on the shoulder. "You did the right thing, Ashton. You did the hard thing and the right thing." "I know, Felix," I said, watching the traffic go by. "I know. So why does it feel like I just lost everything?" I went home, but it wasn't home anymore. Every room was a ghost. The kitchen table where I'd read the lawsuit, the hall table where I'd left the note, the spot under her window where my heart had broken. I couldn't breathe in that house. It was full of Miranda's dreams and Sierra's betrayal. A week later, I called a realtor. "I want to sell, fast," I told him. "Mr. Wilcox," the young man said, "this house is beautiful, a true craftsman's home. You could get top dollar if you're patient." "I'm not patient," I said. "I'm done. Sell it." It sold in 3 days to a young couple, an engineer and his wife. They marveled at the foundation, the solid wood, the perfect joinery. "The man who built this," the engineer said, "he really loved this place." "Yes," I said, signing the papers. "He did. But the love ran out." I packed one suitcase with my clothes, a small box with Miranda's photos, and my satchel of documents. I left everything else. The furniture, the dishes, the memories. I walked out the front door and didn't look back. I drove east. I didn't know where I was going. I just drove until the air smelled like salt. I ended up in Charlotte, a city I'd only visited once with Miranda decades ago. On the outskirts, in an old fishing quarter, I found a small house for sale. It was white stucco with a red tile roof, perched on a small bluff overlooking the Atlantic. It was small, barely 2 rooms. It needed work. But the porch looked out over the endless blue of the ocean. I bought it with the cash from the sale of my Austin home. There was plenty left over. I spent the first month working with my hands again. Not for anyone else. For me. I fixed the roof. I patched the stucco. I painted the porch. I felt the sun on my back and the salt spray on my face. My hands, my rough, calloused hands, were building something again. Not a house for a family, a sanctuary for one. I bought a simple bed, a wooden table, 2 chairs. I sat on the porch every morning with a cup of coffee and watched the sun rise out of the water. The sound of the waves, a constant rhythmic whoosh, began to smooth out the jagged, broken edges of my soul. A stray cat, a scrawny orange thing with a torn ear, started hanging around. I gave him a piece of fish. He never left. I named him Commander. For the first time in my life, I was building nothing for anyone. I was just being. One day, after I'd been in Charlotte for about 6 months, I drove into the city. I found the office of a local notary, an old gentleman named Mr. Cortez. "I need to make a will," I told him. He pulled out the forms. "All right, Mr. Wilcox. Children, grandchildren?" "No," I said. "None." He raised an eyebrow but didn't ask. "I have a house," I said, "and a savings account. I want it all to go to the St. James Youth Home back in Austin." Mr. Cortez stopped writing. "St. James? The orphanage?" "Yes. I believe Pastor Miles still runs it. I want the money to be used for the children, for their education, for their medical care, so they can have a chance." "That's very generous, Mr. Wilcox. May I ask why?" I looked out his window at the bustling street. Let's just say, I want my life's work to go to children who will be grateful for it, not ones who will be ashamed of where it came from. Mr. Cortez nodded slowly. I see. Sometimes the family you choose is more important than the one you're given. I signed the papers. My hand, the one Sierra was so ashamed of, signed away my entire legacy to a building full of strangers. I walked out of that office feeling lighter than I had in years. My money, my work, it had a purpose again. It would build something that mattered. It would build futures. 3 years passed. The salt air and the simple life agreed with me. My hair was white, but my back felt stronger. I spent my days fishing off the pier, working in a small garden I'd planted, and sitting on my porch with Commander purring on my lap. I was 76 years old. I got letters from Pastor Miles at the St. James Youth Home. I sent them a check every month from my savings. Dear Ashton, he would write, thanks to you, we were able to buy new computers for the high schoolers. 3 of our kids got into college on scholarships you helped fund. They pray for you. I read those letters, and I felt a warmth that no amount of forced family gratitude had ever given me. My money was working. My hands, even in retirement, were still building. I heard scraps of news about Austin. Damian Cromwell's family had managed to keep him out of jail, but the guardianship investigation had ruined them. The Cromwell restaurant empire was sold off. Damian had moved north, disgraced. Sierra, she'd been left with nothing. No fiancé, no family money, no father. The last I heard, she was working as a secretary somewhere, renting a small apartment. Just surviving. One evening, I was on my porch, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and purple. Commander was asleep at my feet. The mailman dropped a single envelope in my box. I didn't recognize the handwriting. The postmark was from Austin. I opened it. My hands trembled just slightly. Daddy. My breath caught. It was from Sierra. The first contact in 3 long years. Daddy, I know I have no right to write to you. I know I have no right to even call you that after what I did. There hasn't been a single day in 3 years that I haven't woken up hating myself for what I did, for what I said. My life, it didn't turn out like I dreamed. Damian left me as soon as the money was gone. He was just like me. He only wanted what he could get. I work in a small office. I live in a tiny apartment. It's hard. And every day, I think about what I threw away. I didn't just throw away a wedding. I threw away the only person who ever truly loved me. I threw away my father. For nothing. I am so sorry. I know those words are cheap, but I am. I'm sorry for my words. I'm sorry for the lawsuit. I'm sorry for being a greedy, ungrateful, horrible child. I'm not asking for money. I'm not asking for anything. I need to know. Is there any part of you that could ever forgive me? Can I please see you? I just want to see my father again. Your daughter, Sierra. I read the letter. Then I read it again. I folded it and put it on the table. I stood up and walked down the wooden steps to the beach. The tide was coming in, the waves washing over my old boots. Can we be a family again? I thought about it. I thought about the little girl who'd sat on my shoulders. I thought about the young woman who had spit on my life's work. I felt nothing. The rage was gone. The pain was gone. But the love, the blind, all-consuming love I'd had for her, that was gone too. She had killed it, right under her bedroom window. It had bled out on the stone path next to my watering can. I realized that forgiveness wasn't the issue. I could forgive her, but I could never trust her. I could never look at her again without hearing, "We don't need him anymore." I walked back to the house. I sat at my table and took out a new piece of paper. I wrote a short, clean response. Sierra, I received your letter. I accept your apology, but the damage is done. Not by the lawsuit, not even by the wedding. By the words you said. They showed me your heart, and it's a heart I no longer recognize. A father can forgive his child for almost anything, but he can't forget who she is. I have found my peace here, far away from a life that didn't value me. I wish you the best. I hope you find your own peace. But my life no longer includes the father I once was to you. Some bridges, once they are burned, cannot be rebuilt. Ashton Wilcox. I mailed it the next morning. I never received a reply. Today, I am 76 years old. I am sitting on my porch. The sun is rising over the Atlantic, turning the water to liquid gold. Commander is purring on my lap, a warm, heavy weight. My small boat, the Miranda, bobs gently at my little dock. Later, I'll go out and catch a fish for dinner. My garden is full of ripe tomatoes. I am alone, but I am not lonely. My house by the sea is quiet. It is peaceful. It is filled with the respect I earned for myself. My hands, my rough, unpolished laborer's hands, are wrapped around a warm cup of coffee. Sometimes, the greatest lesson a father can teach is to show that his love is not unconditional, that it must be earned, that dignity is worth more than any family tie. I gave my life's work to build futures for children who have nothing. And in doing so, I finally built a future for myself. I am no longer building for the ungrateful. I am no longer buying affection with sacrifice. Here, in this small house by the sea, where no one is ashamed of the man who lives in it, I am finally, truly, home. If this story resonated with you, leave a like and consider subscribing. You can also drop any comment below, even just one word. Maybe tell me where you're watching from, or what time it is right now. Sometimes one word is enough to say you were here.